Likely too high for a red flag warning. We need it to be below 15%. We have plenty of breezy winds, though. They're out of the east, gusting to 23 miles per hour most recently. So yeah, we're in the thick of the doldrums of summer, the dog days of summer. It's going to be hot all week long, and humidity will be kind of borderline red flag conditions all week long. So you can see smoke plumes in the mountains from our Pueblo Skycam right now, but the east-southeast wind is keeping that smoke away from Pueblo proper, but it is pushing it further into the mountain valleys. So especially into Custer County, the Wet Mountain Valley. Smoke's going to be pretty thick tonight, so keep that in mind. We're going to continue to have a southeast wind flow that keeps the smoke mostly west of I-25 for tomorrow. Our temperatures right now pretty toasty across the board, 80s and 90s. Tonight we'll drop to the 50s and 60s. Tomorrow, much of the same. Diane. Colorado, it is a sunny, hot Monday. Our temperatures near average or a few degrees above average, and this is going to be the status quo for most of the week. So we're in these dog days of summer in mid-July, and that is our pattern we're stuck with. Right now we're in the 80s and 90s in the plains, and we're in the 70s to 80s in the mountains. So of course you'll find the cooler weather in the higher elevations, but it seems to be a lot cooler in Woodland Park at 69 currently. And I'll show you why it's a lot cooler in Teller County compared to the rest of us. But speaking of the rest of us, the U.S. in general is hot, especially the northern Great Plains. Right now it's 103 in Rapid City. It's 97 in Billings, Montana. So we have this ridge of high pressure that's set up over the entire country this week, and the strongest section of that high is in the northern Great Plains, which is why they're experiencing the hottest weather of the country right now. But generally this high pressure sticks around all week long, and it's not going to budge very much even by the weekend. However, there's a little bit of moisture coming around this high, and it does have some storm chances in our forecast for this week in Colorado. But we are still going to be hot. Tonight we'll drop to the 50s and 60s, and tomorrow once again to the 80s and 90s. We'll be near average or up to about 5 degrees above average tomorrow. And we'll be in that same zone really all week long. So let's talk about Woodland Park. Extra cloudy this afternoon, 69 degrees, 40% humidity. That's the wettest portion of our region right now because there have been some active showers in Teller County. So some of this moisture is kind of wrapping around the high pressure. We're still pretty dry in eastern Colorado, but the mountains right now, in particular the higher elevations of Fremont County, are getting some shower activity. And as I go forward in time the next few days, the moisture will be up into the mountains, and that's great news because that's where we have the worst drought conditions in the state, and we basically have a daily chance of showers in the high country this week. Here in eastern Colorado, it's mostly just going to be hot and dry for the work week. However, we'll start to see some signs of thunderstorm activity starting this weekend in the eastern plains, and then especially heading into next week, we'll get a much larger plume of moisture on the west side of this high pressure that increases our rain chances. And we need it because we're definitely falling behind for precipitation in Colorado Springs. July is typical, but it's hot, it's dry, and it's breezy enough that fire activity will continue. Right now, our winds are out of the east-southeast at 10 miles per hour, gusting to 20 in Beulah. So with that east-southeast wind, it's keeping most of the smoke up towards the wet mountains. You can see the smoke plumes from our Pueblo Skycam tonight. Pueblo itself is relatively clear compared to the air quality that has been very poor in the past couple of weeks. That smoke likely to settle down into the Wet Mountain Valley tonight, specifically Custer County, the northern San Luis Valley. And tomorrow, continuing to see southeast wind, and that will keep most of that smoke up into the high country. And you can see quite a view. There's a lot of things happening. Let's start with the Aspen Acres fire, where you can see the gray of the smoke plume as the fire continues to burn, especially in the interior mountain zone on the west side of the fire. But then you just look a little further west and there's dark rain clouds. There's a nice shower going through the Wet Mountain Valley right now. And when you see this, you just wish, why isn't that rain just a little further east on the fire? So that's kind of the tale of Colorado this week. We're mostly going to be hot. It's 90 degrees right now in Canyon City. And for the plains, it's going to be a dry week. For the mountains, there will be daily storms. So let's start with the heat. Right now, we're in the 80s and 90s for the lower elevations. For the mountains, we're in the 70s and 80s. A little bit cooler in the mountains because of the increased elevation, but also because of extra cloud cover. Some of our hottest temperatures across the country today are in the northern Great Plains. Right now it's 102 in Rapid City, 96 in Billings and Minneapolis, 90 degrees, Chicago 90. So a ridge of high pressure has really taken over the country. Everyone's going to be hot this week, but wherever the central part of this high is where the hottest temperatures will be. And that's over the northern Great Plains and the Great Lakes region in the next day or two. But generally, this pattern sticks around and it's just going to be stuck here. So under high pressure, we have sinking air, and generally that means a clear sky and hot temperatures. But I'll talk about where that moisture is coming from for the mountains in just a moment. Talking about tonight, we're going to drop to the 50s and 60s. Very mild start to the day. The morning hours are going to be the nicest to get outside for a longer walk. The afternoons are going to be hot. We'll be to the 80s and 90s once again on Tuesday afternoon, and we're going to remain either near or above average for the next 7 days straight. Looks like temperatures will peak again by this weekend. So there's a little bit of moisture riding around the edge of this high pressure, and it has some of that activity in the mountains. So right now in Westcliff, the Wet Mountain Valley, that's that rain you can see from our Canyon City sky camera, but the fire is burning right here. Unfortunately, that rain just missing out. What you'll notice here in the extended outlook is that every afternoon you'll see showers west of I-25 up into the mountains. That's where we have the best moisture this week. In the plains, it's just going to be hot and dry basically all week long. But we have the moisture coming to where we really need it the most, where there's active fires burning and where we have the worst drought conditions. So that's okay for now. At least we do have some moisture within this heat coming for the week. Now looking ahead, when did the eastern plains finally get moisture? Well, that will be next week. So starting this weekend into next week, finally looking at a more widespread moisture plume below 15% for at least 3 hours to reach red flag criteria. Didn't quite meet that today, so technically no red flag warnings, but that doesn't mean we don't have fire activity. We definitely do. Easterly winds are gusting around 22 miles per hour most recently. So you can see the smoke plumes from Pueblo this afternoon. They're still actively burning, especially on the west side of this fire. With this easterly component to the wind, it's keeping a lot of that smoke nestled up against the wet mountains and kind of spilling over into the Wet Mountain Valley. It was hot today across the region, 90 in Colorado Springs, 97 in Pueblo, so about 3 degrees above average. And we're going to stay in this hot July pattern this week. Right now, we're still pretty toasty, solid 90s along the Arkansas River. Colorado City still at 93 degrees. Tonight we'll drop to the 50s and 60s. The morning is a great time to be out to get a walk in before the afternoon becomes hot again. 80s and 90s for Tuesday. Diane. View in Pueblo tonight, where you can see multiple smoke plumes from the Aspen Acres fire burning in the Wet Mountains. So you can see them here in the distance as the sun starts to set here tonight. It's still pretty toasty, mid-90s in Pueblo, pretty dry, 15% humidity. We've got an east-southeast wind at 18 miles per hour. It's that easterly component to the wind that's really important in where this smoke is going to be going this week. We're mostly going to have that that easterly component to the wind here in eastern Colorado. That's going to keep a lot of the smoke from fires burning in the mountains kind of staying in the mountains. So tonight it will probably settle into the Wet Mountain Valley, perhaps the northern San Luis Valley. Lighten up a little bit at times, but still fire activity is expected there this week, partly because it's just going to be so hot and mostly dry. It was 90 in Colorado Springs today. It was 97 in Pueblo, about 3 degrees above average. So we weren't near records, but we are a lot cooler than some other sections of the country where there are records being broken this week. Check out Rapid City right now at 102 degrees. Right now it's 88 in Colorado Springs. You compare that to Billings, Montana, still at 96 this evening. So we have a large ridge of high pressure that's kind of overtaken the entire country. And where we have the central and strongest part of that high is where we have the hottest temperatures. And that's mostly in the northern Great Plains here today and tomorrow, kind of moving towards the Great Lakes. But in general, this high pressure is going to be with us all week long. So under a ridge of high, we get stagnant air, we get heat, and it just is not changing. Each and every day, our temperatures are going to be very similar. Tonight, we'll drop to the 50s and 60s. Tomorrow, 80s and 90s. Once again, not a whole lot of change, maybe by a couple degrees each day. We'll be a little closer to average the next few days, but then the heat will make a little bit of a peak again by this weekend as that high kind of moves a little further south. But generally, we're in the dog days of summer. However, there is a little bit of moisture kind of being wrapped around this ridge of high pressure on the west side, and that will be in the mountains this week where we need the moisture the most. So we have had some shower activity, Teller County, Fremont County, Custer County this afternoon. And expect us to still see some showers every day in the mountains, mostly west of the Continental Divide, but a few showers here locally in our area as well. But this is really great to see because this is where we have the worst drought conditions of the entire state. And with the heat under the ridge of high pressure, at least we have some moisture for relief for fire crews. As we head closer to the weekend, looks like we'll get a little bit of a shift in our pattern, allowing for a broader area of moisture to be moving over the western U.S. as the ridge scoots a little further to the east. So late this weekend into next week, more of a month Pueblo. So expect similar conditions pretty much all week long. It's just mid-July heat that's going to stick around. This evening, we've got a bit of a breeze still in the plains coming out of the southeast. Now, this easterly component to the wind has definitely kept the smoke west of I-25, at least at the surface level. It's likely to settle into the northern San Luis Valley and the Wet Mountain Valley here tonight. With increased smoke activity tomorrow and fire activity, more smoke is likely to be output by the fire going through Custer County, again with that southeast flow for tomorrow. Temperatures are starting to cool down tonight, but it's going to be another mild evening, above average overnight lows to the 50s and 60s. We'll do it all again tomorrow, very similar conditions, sunshine, 80s and 90s. Southern Colorado, our sky is partly cloudy to mostly clear, not as much smoke in the atmosphere tonight, and in general still quite warm outside. Our temperatures overnight will be a little bit above average, drop into the 50s and 60s. In general, in the morning hours, that's going to be the best, most comfortable time frame to be outside, going on a longer walk. The puppy paws should be okay with the cooler pavement temperatures, but then we're getting into really hot conditions by the afternoon. We'll have a lot of sunshine, so playground equipment, sidewalk temperatures are going to really start to heat up. Our high temperatures will be a few degrees above average still, with 80s and 90s in the afternoon on Tuesday. We're not alone in the heat. Much of the U.S. is in the 80 pressure. Some of the hottest conditions triple digits in North and South Dakota is because the center of that high pressure is right over the northern Great Plains. So actually portions of Montana will be hotter than us tomorrow, and some of that heat will move into the Great Lakes region this week as well. So high pressure is our dominant weather pattern here this week, and that's really not going anywhere anytime soon. So you're going to notice our temperatures are going to remain quite high. However, there's a little difference here that will make a change for our mountain zones. So you can see on our water vapor satellite imagery, there is some moisture kind of wrapping up around this ridge of high pressure. It's really dry in the center of it, but we have some of that water vapor over the mountains. And you could see that with the afternoon showers and storms today. They got as far east as Teller County. That was nice to see some shower activity. Eastern Plains in that dry section, and expected to stay in that dry section here this week, while the mountains still have some of that water vapor to work with. So each afternoon now, we'll see these pop-up showers and storms favoring the mountain zones, especially in the San Juans. That's really great news because most of our fires are burning in our mountains, and this is where we have the worst drought conditions. So this will be beneficial in an otherwise really hot pattern that we have this week. So these shower chances are with us here daily. It looks like eventually by this weekend, and then next week, high pressure moves a little bit further east, and this will open up that plume of moisture to impact really the entirety of the West Coast, and that will be beneficial for us here in eastern Colorado eventually.